Welcome to the Effective Questioning Techniques webinar, sponsored by Carbon-Lehigh Intermediate Unit. In this webinar, we will be previewing and discussing some aspects on improving questioning in the classroom. I'm Cathy Enders, a member of the Curriculum and Instruction and Educational Technologies Department. I've been in education since 1979, and hopefully the information I share with you today can be used in your classroom. Today we will be looking at how can we connect questioning to the Common Core and meeting the rigors of the new PA Core standards. And to do this, we will be looking at what is quality questioning. What are some of the research findings around questioning in the classroom? And then we will look at some classroom strategies for one aspect of the research findings. But before we get started, it's always nice to have a common frame of reference. And so we're going to start with some food for thought. Questioning a la Ferris.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the, anyone? The Great Depression, passed the, anyone? A tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which, anyone, raised or lowered? Raised tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. Did it work? Anyone? Anyone know the effects? It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression. Today, we have a similar debate over this. Anyone know what this is, class? Anyone? Anyone? Anyone seen this before? The Laffer curve. Anyone know what this says? It says that at this point on the revenue curve, you will get exactly the same amount of revenue as at this point. This is very controversial. Does anyone know what Vice President Bush called this in 1980? Anyone? Something DOO economics. Voodoo economics.
So why quality questioning? What are the connections between quality questions and student learning and achievement? Well, these three processes, questioning, understanding, and thinking, interact in a dynamic fashion to advance student learning, performance, and achievement. They are the action verbs that create the energy for student work, the fuel for learning. So questioning has a very vital role. And by focusing on some of the research and what we can do in the classroom, we can improve student learning and achievement. In the book Teaching Thinking Through Effective Questioning, Francis Hunkin states, "We are shifting from viewing questions as devices by which one evaluates the specifics of learning to conceptualizing questions as a means of actively processing, thinking about, and using information productively." If we think back to the clip from Ferris Bueller, there was an awful lot of teacher evaluation of specifics of learning, not a whole lot of actively processing, thinking about, and using information. What we need are the kinds of questions that lead learners to better understandings of the structure of knowledge and the relevance of this knowledge to their personal lives. This will go far in helping us reach the rigor of the Common Core, but even going beyond that to have productive citizens. So what do you think? Think back to the Ferris Bueller clip. How many questions do you think that teacher, asked in a 30-minute period? Believe it or not, in that clip, which was somewhere around a minute and 15 seconds, he asked a whole lot of questions. There were definitely more than one or two questions. So, what about yourself? How many questions do you think you ask in a 30-minute period? How many questions would be desirable? How many questions do your students ask? How many student questions would be ideal? So these key pieces, these questions, will help us as we unpack the research. So what does the research reveal? This research that we're looking at today is a compilation from a book called Quality Questioning, where they looked at research that has been conducted and sort of summarized the findings for us. So the first finding is that teachers ask many questions. And if we think about our own selves, yes, we do. In fact, the research has shown that we ask 2 to 3 per minute. That Ferris Bueller clip certainly had more than 2 to 3 in that minute and 15 second segment of the class. The questions, we want to promote student learning, but do they? What we need to be more cautious of, and this is the implications that the research suggests, is that we need to plan our questions to match the instructional objectives and promote thinking, especially the level of thinking that we're desiring. Use of a few carefully selected questions preferred over the large numbers of questions. The second finding is that most teacher questions are at the lowest cognitive level. Only about 20% in the studies required thinking at higher levels. 20% of the questions at higher levels, and 2 to 3 questions per minute really doesn't allow time for thinking. That was definitely evident in the Ferris Bueller clip. There was not time for thinking, and those questions were mostly at the lower levels of Bloom's, remembering and understanding. But Bloom's is not the only reference tool we should use in looking at the cognitive level of questions. There are others that we can use, and actually using multiple views will help us really analyze what is the cognitive level of the questions we are asking in the classroom. We might want to look at Webb's depth of knowledge. Definitely those of us in Pennsylvania, we know that our Keystone exams and the new PSSA exams that are coming are using Webb's depth of knowledge in the creation of those questions, and that most of those questions are probably going to be at Webb's depth of knowledge levels 2 and 3. Another view might be Costa's level of questions. Just a different lens, but helpful in developing understanding and awareness of how our brains go about looking at questions and what's required of our brains cognitively. So the implications are this: we must purposefully plan and ask questions that require higher order thinking. We need to help students become familiar with the different levels of thinking, and then help them be aware of the kind of thinking required by the question. As we look also to connect with the Charlotte Danielson framework for effective teaching, we know that this is going to require, and so is finding number 1, this applies to domain 1, that offstage domain of planning and preparation. But this one also ties to domain 3, the student's self-awareness of their learning. We need to help them do that. We need to help them monitor Do they understand? Do they not? And by helping them become familiar with the different levels of thinking and the kind of thinking required by a question, we are helping promote this self-awareness and self-assessment. Finding number 3 is probably not surprising if we are really honest with ourselves. Not all students are accountable to respond to all questions. I'm sure we can all visualize the small number of students who answer the majority of the questions in our classroom. The research verified this. And what the research also verified, it's the students who regularly ask and answer questions who do better on the achievement tests. So we need to be careful with this one. Are we using strategies that give every student an opportunity to answer? And are we establishing a classroom culture that all students' answers are important? Domain 2 of the Danielson framework talks about this very thing. Finding number 4. Wait time after asking a question and after a student answers a question is less than 1 second. I'm sure we have all heard about the importance of wait time, but when the research is conducted, or if we have someone actually just informally come into our classrooms, it's going to be a lot less than we think. It's hard to wait. We realize that. But the significance is, and the research again verifies this, that when wait time increases, more students participate. Answers are longer and of higher quality, and then achievement improves. It's really rather simple. We need to increase wait time after asking a question. But one that we don't think about is increasing wait time after a student answers a question. And this ties directly to the 5th finding. Teachers often accept incorrect answers, or maybe we could even say incomplete answers, without probing. And teachers frequently answer their own questions. We can laugh at Ferris Bueller because the teacher definitely did that. But the sad part is that the research that's been conducted bears this out in classrooms. Nearly half of student answers are at a different cognitive level than the teacher question. So why do we stop there? Teachers that probed, they found that the probing questions to get them to finish or complete the answer at a better cognitive level is positively correlated with increased student achievement. So we need to provide prompts when necessary to help students give correct answers. Now, I will admit there is a fine line here that we need to walk. They're not talking about giving them a probe or a prompt that would sort of hand them the answer. They're talking about the type of prompt to get them to think a little deeper, to pause. What else do they know? What else can they add and provide to give that complete, full, correct answer? But there's another side of this coin. We are prompting and probing because we want to seek to understand student answers more completely. Is it truly that they understand nothing? Or is it that their understanding is insufficient, incomplete, or misconceptions are part of it? We really need to seek to understand them so we can provide the right scaffolds and supports to build complete, correct understanding. As we look at the Charlotte Danielson framework, again, domain 3 of monitoring student understanding, we can't do that if we're not pausing and prompting and seeking to understand their answers. The last finding is interesting. It's that students ask very few content-related questions. And the question is, why do they ask very few? Well, one of the things the research has found that teachers feel they cannot take time for student questions. But when those teachers do take time for student questions, they support higher levels of engagement, and eventually then the students are able to ask quality content related questions. They're starting to ask questions like they would if they were a scientist or a mathematician or someone who is an artist, a musician. So the implications are that we need to value student questions, we need to make time for those student questions, and we need to help students learn to formulate good questions. Making time for student questions and valuing student questions, that's all about Domain 2 and the framework. That classroom environment piece. But helping students learn to formulate good questions, that's part of good instruction, Domain 3. So the other piece is these findings are not isolated findings. Every one of these is connected. The reason they ask very few content-related questions is because we don't pause between questions. We're just constantly firing questions, or we're answering them ourselves. So they are all related and interconnected. So we really need to look at these findings together. And what is it that we can do to support it? Yes, we want to look at them together, but sometimes just starting with one and tweaking it will help us make improvements and changes in other areas as well. Even though we realize that these findings do connect and overlap, let's hone in on finding number 3, opportunities to respond. What are some strategies that would increase the number of different students answering questions? Here is just a few. It's a list. It's not all-inclusive, but here are some ideas, and we'll talk about each one. Answer sticks. This is an alternative to having students raise their hand. And what you can do is use popsicle sticks, put one student name on each popsicle stick, and make sure there is a popsicle stick for every student. Simply put them in a cup and ask the question, give think time, pull a popsicle stick, and whoever student is on there, the student will be the one to answer the question. Very simple. Again, you can set the stick down then that person has answered and continue around until you have used up all or most of the sticks, or for that class period, the student have answered. Now, there are some other things you can do with the answer sticks. You can actually put a cup inside of another cup, okay, smaller one inside of a larger, and you can use that smaller one to isolate some students. So suppose you have that handful that are always answering and maybe even sometimes jumping in all the time, not allowing other students to answer. Put those students in the smaller cup, and then you're always choosing randomly, but strategically randomly, from those that remain in the larger cup. It has worked. I've used that one myself. Again, you can do that for any kind of time when you want to sort of selectively yet randomly choose students. One problem with that is sometimes you have students that it puts them on the spot and they have trouble with answering quickly. There are some other things to do, including that wait time. And we'll talk about scaffolding before students answer in a few moments. Another one that works well when you are trying to balance the number of times a student is responding to questions is every student gets talking tickets for the day. And those talking tickets, you can call them talking tickets if it's a discussion, or it could be the responding tickets if it's questioning that you are doing. And when a student responds, they turn in a ticket. When their tickets are used, they may not answer again, and you can set the rule unless, and set some kind of rule for getting them additional tickets. But again, this is another one for balancing when you have certain students who seem to dominate answering or even dominate in discussions. If you are more interested in getting responses from everyone before you have a discussion or before you talk about why is their answer that way, giving solutions in math class possibly, but you want to see from all of them what their answers are so you can adjust what you do next, then individual response tools are important. You can do these through response cards. They can be as simple as a card with A, B, C, and D written at one end, and use A on one end, B on the other, flip it over, C is on the other end, D, and then they just hold up the end facing the teacher for the answer. So that would work for multiple choice. You could do response cards such as agree, disagree, not sure. Colored index cards work well for that. Agree would be green. Disagree might be a pink or red. And not sure might be the yellow. You can also use those anytime it's a true or false. You could use the green and the red and do true or false questions. Those work very well in many subjects. Sometimes you actually need to see it's a completion answer. It is a math problem. This is where small whiteboards come into play. No, you do not have to purchase the individual whiteboards pre-made. They probably run anywhere from $8 to $10 a person. There are other things you can do. Small whiteboards. We have used cardstock and laminated it. And I have discovered that the watercolor markers such as Mr. Sketch or the dry erase markers or even the vis-a-vis markers that are used for overhead projectors work. The watercolor markers such as Mr. Sketch watercolor markers or the vis-a-vis markers need a damp cloth to erase, but they still work and they work very well. So you can do something that inexpensive. The other alternatives are to get the board at your big box hardware store, and they will sometimes even cut them for you. The things they use inside showers work like a laminated whiteboard. If you have the technology available, there are classroom response systems. There are classroom response systems that are one single handheld device for every student. And with some of those, it doesn't have to be multiple choice. You could enter a number answer or a word or two and type them in. There are also classroom response systems that and means of using that actually use smartphones. The other possibility is some of them work off of a web browser and on computers. Again, this can be individual. This could even be in pairs that you could use this. So these are all possibilities for increasing the responses and giving everyone opportunities to respond before having a discussion or before giving the correct answer or having a discussion of why does that work. Now, what happens when you have students who are reluctant to talk no matter what? Well, then you do some scaffolds. to help them form their answer before using one of the other items. These often work well if you are working in pairs or small groups. Works well for 2s, 3s, and 4s. First item is you pose the question, you give them time to think, and then do a quick pair share with your partner. You may modify your answer after that pair share, but when you do answer, you need to be able to explain your answer, and then you can use the answer sticks or talking tickets. Numbered heads together is when you allow a small group of 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s, where they're all numbered, to discuss their answers, knowing that number 3, they know ahead who is going to be responding, but it gives them a chance to think and discuss beforehand. Random reporter is very similar to numbered heads together, except this time they do not know who's going to be reporting it out. So in this case, the accountability is for everyone. In numbered heads together, they know who's going to be answering, so it's more of a support and encouragement. How could you formulate the answer? Do we agree on the answer? Just builds that confidence. The random reporter is much more of an accountability tool. So, as I said, these are not the exclusive possibilities to increase student responses. But again, this is just one possibility of making a change. I will tell you that many cases, it's the type of questions and the questions that are being posed that need to be worked on as well. And it's when you take some of these research findings and work on multiple together that you see the most improvement in student motivation, engagement, quality of response, and higher order thinking. The main resources that we have used for today's webinar, in addition to our experiences in the department, are these 3. The book Quality Questioning, Research-Based Practice to Engage Every Learner is the book which I referred to when we were discussing the research findings. That book also gives wonderful strategies and other deeper information for moving forward with quality questioning in classrooms. A Kagan Smart Card. They are very brief, quick ideas. I love the Kagan Smart Cards for reminders. We often get in a rut and we forget about some of those good practices and the good things we remember to do. And the Kagan Quick Smart Cards are just quick reminders of some key things we can do. And then Edutopia had an article about 3 steps for improving teacher questions, which you might want to read in a very simple, quick blog format, very recent article. And again, teacher questions are even more vital now with our 21st century learning environments. Google can find answer to those low-level questions for us very quickly. There isn't a need for as many of those. Yes, there is still a need, but the answers are now at our fingertips. So we really do need to increase the level, the cognitive difficulty of our questions. So we hope you had something useful that you found in today's webinar. And if you are intrigued, if you would really like to know more and dig deeper into these, we are offering an online course beginning on January 6th and running through February 24th called Questioning Techniques for the Pennsylvania Core. This course will run for 6 weeks. You will be spending approximately 3 hours a week working on assignments in a totally asynchronous environment, meaning everything is done through a web-based learning management system. You will do the work on your time at your convenience and have discussions virtually through readings and your lessons through this platform. You will receive 18 hours for Act 48, which is how we came up with approximately 3 hours a week of time running for 6 weeks. Very low cost of $60 for you. And we will be looking deeper into not just teacher questioning, but student questioning, look deeper at some of the classifications such as Bloom, Webb, and cost as levels of questions. Do you have questions about either the upcoming online course or some additional resources? Please feel free to contact us. You can call the Curriculum and Instruction Educational Technologies Department at the number listed, or email Cathy Enders, who led this webinar. Thank you for joining us. We hope to see you soon for another webinar tying to the classroom. Have a good day.